So people are always asking me, how can people support Donald Trump? And that's a good question. So let's talk about it in today's video. Hi, I'm Mike Greiner. I'm a lifelong Democratic activist who's concerned about the direction our country is taking. I'm also a lawyer and an academic, and I'm here to help you stand up to the BS of the MAGA crowd. So the other day, one of my viewers left a comment asking, I'm wondering why so many Americans would want to re-elect Trump or any Republican MAGA traitors. And you know what? I kind of agree with what she's saying. I feel the same way. I can't believe that people are willing to vote for Republicans given everything that we've experienced. And that's part of the reason that I do this channel, to try to express my views on this and maybe kind of give you some ammunition to stand up and be able to fight for the values that we all believe in. And although there have been various theories floated as to why we're dealing with the kind of division and negativity that we're dealing with right now, the data actually from research is pretty clear on this point. And the bottom line is it has to do with race. Yes, there are other factors that have been shown to be correlated with relative to support to Donald Trump or not supporting Donald Trump. For example, educational attainment is a big one. But I would argue that a big part of the reason why educational attainment is correlated with lack of support for Republicans is because of the fact that people who are more educated tend to be more open-minded, perhaps have been exposed to people of different races and different ethnic backgrounds, have been exposed to the broader world in a way that people who are less educated might not be. So I actually think that this is an example of correlation, not causation. To me, though, the cause is pretty clearly illustrated by an experience I had the other day with my wife and daughter. Our grandson goes to a public school not too far away from us. It's not the local school for our neighborhood, but it's a school of choice, but nevertheless still a public school in our area. Despite the fact that it's close, though, it happens to be just over the border of our county. Now, the county that we live in is called Macomb County, and the bordering county is a county called Oakland County. That's the county where my grandson's school is, and also where I teach, by the way. Both these counties border Detroit, and historically, they're the areas that a lot of people in the 1960s, 1970s, and even 1980s fled from Detroit out to the suburbs. These are the classic areas that were developed post-World War II, when you see the images of Suburban America with the rows of ranch houses and the relatively large spaces between one person's home and another. As it turns out, though, Macomb County was more an area where working class folks moved to. These are the people who worked in the auto factories and who had good jobs, largely thanks to the unions, by the way. And as a result, despite the fact that they had relatively low educational achievement, they still were able to become part of the middle class as a result of the great jobs that they had. Oakland County, for its part, though, tends to have slightly more well-educated people move there. Why? I don't know. It's just the way things worked out. There also tends to be, by the way, a larger Jewish population in Oakland County than in Macomb County. At any rate, these factors led to Macomb County being a traditionally Democratic bastion, dominated by the white working class who voted repeatedly for the Democrats after FDR. Oakland County, interestingly enough, tended to be more of a Republican area. Now, over the past decade or so, since we've had President Obama and then President Trump, and now President Biden, you've seen these areas kind of switch. And now Macomb County, actually, is a pretty strongly Republican area, with Oakland County becoming increasingly Democratic. So what you're seeing here really is a reflection of the trends that have been going on nationwide. But it's important to note, I think, that these trends didn't start with President Obama. They were exacerbated and made more evident as a result of his election. But the move of the white working class over to the Republicans started as early as the late 1970s. Indeed, it was after the 1980 election of Ronald Reagan that pollster Stan Greenberg, who later went to work for Bill Clinton, described the residents of Macomb County as being the Reagan Democrats. More recently, though, Macomb County has become pretty hardcore Republican. In fact, in 2016, it was one of 3 counties nationwide that, if its votes were taken out of the vote total for that state, we would have had President Hillary Clinton, not President Trump. Would that were the case. So where my wife and I live, and where I've now lived for more than half my life, is truly one of the key areas where you've seen those white working class folks swing against the Democratic Party. At the same time, where I work and where my grandson goes to school is in that county where you've seen the swing of more educated voters over to the Democratic Party. So the other day, my wife, my daughter, and I went over to our grandson's school because his class was walking over to the local ice cream store. Now, unlike how things were when our kids were young, we really don't know the teacher very well or the other parents very well. I mean, as a result of COVID, we haven't had access to the classroom. We haven't been able to be involved at the school the way we had been in the past. We don't go on field trips with the kids where we get to know other parents. So although we know a few of them, we didn't really have a true picture of the people our grandson goes to school with outside of just what he's told us. Now, one thing that became plainly evident almost as soon as we got there is that the ethnic makeup of our grandson's school is very different from the ethnic makeup of the schools that our kids went to here in our home county of Macomb. The parents accompanying us included multiple multiracial couples, and the number of kids who didn't have some color in their skin of varying shades was pretty small, actually. Now, to see the kids interact, you wouldn't have known anything. I mean, they all got along great. They all played just like normal kids would. And truthfully, I've noticed that to my grandson, he really doesn't even notice race. I mean, it's something that he's just had as part of his life. You know, he's more likely to describe someone as having a red shirt than as having black skin, for example. But when my wife pointed out how great it is to see just how diverse his class is, I pointed out that this is increasingly the reality that we're seeing across America. Among young people, white people are no longer the majority, and America is steadily moving toward a future where the average person will likely have brown skin. This is obviously a huge change from how America has been in the past, and has really created a sense of concern among a lot of the white people, again, especially working class white people, who have been used to having a certain level of privilege as a result of the color of their skin, but who now face a future where the color of their skin is no longer a ticket to some kind of undue advantage. This is why we see all this talk of victimization among the Trump supporters. They're used to being put up on a pedestal, simply again as a result of the color of their skin, and now no longer, they're not going to be on that pedestal anymore. They're just going to be another one of the groups who make up the multi-ethnic population of the United States of America. The image of the melting pot that in many ways has been kind of elusive to the United States for a long time might finally be coming to pass. And the election of Barack Obama president was really just a reflection, a culmination, if you will, of that change that has been occurring here in the United States over the past 20 or 30 years. Now, this dynamic helps explain how Republican activists at the grassroots have felt that their leaders didn't stand up for them. And truthfully, until the election of Trump, I didn't fully understand it. There was this sense among this former white majority that's now turning into a white minority that their leaders weren't standing up for them. I mean, consider George W. Bush when he was prosecuting the wars against Iraq and Afghanistan. He made it clear repeatedly that he was waging a war against terrorism, not a war against Islam. Whereas, on the other hand, a lot of the Republicans at the grassroots actually honestly believed that they should be waging a war against Islam. That gap is the opportunity that Trump saw that he stepped into. From the very moment of his announcement speech, when he talked about the Mexican rapists coming across the border and building the wall, he was speaking a language that communicated directly with the sense of lack of control and fear that the white population had. And that's why they embraced him so fully, despite the fact that he is such a flawed candidate in so many ways. They loved him for the fact that he finally was speaking the language that they wanted to hear. No longer would they be satisfied with the kind of coded racist references that date back to the Nixon campaign of 1968. That approach hadn't served them very well. Now they wanted actual racism mainlined directly into the system, and that's what Trump was giving them. Now, the sad truth of the matter is, I'm talking here about the average Republican activists. Clearly, at the very top, you've got some elites, the multi-billionaires in many cases, who want the Republican Party to stand up for their plutocratic agenda. And stand up for that, they do. But the way that the Republican Party has been able to parlay that minority group into a majority, or at least a large segment of the American population, has been by appealing to these racial resentments of this white working class who more and more are starting to see that the color of their skin alone isn't going to entitle them to the privilege that they've gotten so used to. Now, when I explained this to my wife and daughter, their response was, well, why can't people get along? Why does it matter who's on top? And that's a good question, and I wish that people could just get along, to quote Rodney King. But something tells me that there's a part of them that's really afraid of what will happen if the new majority, made up of people of color, start treating the new white minority the way that we, when we were in the majority, treated black people, for example. Now, call me an optimist, but I actually believe that that won't happen. And the goal of our multi-ethnic society will be one where people do get along better despite their ethnic backgrounds. But the idea that they could be losing this privilege that they've come to enjoy now in the United States here for the past 400 years is something that's deeply disconcerting to this white working class. And it's why they're willing to go so far as to give up our hard-won democracy to maintain their power despite the fact that they are no longer the majority. Well, if you want to see some more information about the way that the Republicans have baked racism into their message, why don't you check out this video over here? The reality is that direct and blatant appeals to race have become central to the MAGA message. I'll see you then. In the meantime, let's hope for continued progress. Thank you.